Good morning or afternoon, everybody. We've got still a few folks that are trying to get logged in, so we are going to give them about another minute, and then we will dive right in. So stand by. All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is PJ Kling. I'm the VP of Marketing here at NuVoodoo, joined by Lee Jacobs, our EVP of Research, and we are excited to slay this beast together today. A couple of business things here at the top. Like always, our promise to keep the upsells light remains, and if you have any questions, please chat them into Jake so that we can address them at the end of the presentation today. Also, we cannot send out today's deck, but by signing up for the webinar today, you'll get a recording in your inbox shortly after the conclusion of the event that will give you a chance to review any slides you missed or that we didn't linger on long enough. Now, one of the big topics of conversation this fall is going to be the new wearable meters, especially in light of Nielsen's promise to churn up to 75% of the panel this upcoming season. Now, that's led to a lot of questions. We're sure you have many as well. So we made an effort to break out these data in ways that tell at least some of the story, knowing that we'll all be learning more once these are implemented. Now, because of those breakouts, we wanted to make sure that we had enough sample size to accurately account for each. So we fielded an even bigger sample than normal, 5,495 14 to 54-year-olds across all PPM markets, weighted for market and population size, so more interviews in Washington, D.C. than West Palm Beach, as an example. We obviously took a less serious approach to promoting this webinar with the Wearable Wolf, but the data that you're going to see today is both serious and actionable. So we are excited, as we always are, to share it with you. And with that, I turn it over to Lee and RPS 20.
Thanks very much, PJ. So this study starts from a sample of research-friendly people. I think it's important to think about that going in. These are people who end up completing a 15-minute online interview with us. And among that group of people who already like research, when we line up a series of questions to mimic the recruitment process for PPM measurement, 1 in 5 make it through that process. Think about that. I mean, we're already talking about a population who are willing to participate in a research study. So you see the scale of the challenge that Nielsen has in front of us. Among this sample of 5,495 respondents, 14 to 54 across all 48 PPM markets, they're the RPS yes folks, so they represent a significant chunk nevertheless. And we divide them up into two groups. There's that little tiny blue sliver, the RPS 60s. They're folks who would likely make it through the recruitment process and use their meters enough to stay within the sample, and they listen to broadcast radio at least an hour a day. We call them RPS 60s. 34% of our wider sample of 54 to 95 say they listen to radio less than the 5-minute threshold that's set for credit in a quarter hour. Now, among those likely to show up in the rating samples, the RPS yes folks, it's just 18% who fall below that 5-minute threshold. Now, Nielsen will tell you that 90% plus listen to radio on a weekly basis. Of course, those numbers are 12 plus. These are 14 to 54s in this data. So we've cut off the oldest end of Gen Z, the entire generation of baby boomers and those from the silent generation or older, many of them lifelong radio users. And these are self-estimates behavior on a typical day. So if you imagine actual listening across a full week, it's reasonable to imagine that enough of those sub 5-minute listeners pick up casual quarter hours on a meter, plus you add in all the 55 plus folks, that you'd get to the Nielsen number, despite we show that as 82% who meet the 5-minute mark of listening to broadcast radio. On the other side, the right side of this page, you'll see that ratings likelies, those in blue here, nearly double the overall population for listening to radio for at least an hour a day. That 37% of ratings likelies here who listen to the radio at least an hour a day, those are the RPS 60s who are all told just a sliver, 7% of this sample, but nevertheless 37% of the RPS yes ratings likelies overall. Now, if you're part of the new wearable sample, you'll be able to configure your meter as a wristband, which is what most people say they'll do, 57% overall, or a clip mount, kind of a mini pager, which is what about a fifth of the sample says they'll do. They're shown here in olive. Likely the folks who already have a watch and a Fitbit, who've already got both wrists involved, so they don't want to add a third thing on their arm. Or maybe they wanted to configure them as a pendant. That's close to another fifth, 19% in blue here overall. That one's of concern. I can't imagine anyone wearing that thing outside their clothing, and we certainly hope that that'll pick up listening of, of stations if you're wearing it underneath your clothing. Massive sample here. Yields 1,119 RPS yes ratings likely. It's a fifth of the sample, as I showed you. And for the 20th time in a row, when we've asked the top 3 reasons why they'd participate in the ratings from a large panel of reasons that we've gleaned from past panelists, the number one answer again and again and again and again is getting paid for participating. Smaller groups responded to the ideas like making their voices heard, influencing programming, or rewarding stations they enjoy. And about half tapped into the part where they can win additional awards for carrying the device, which will be foreground for panelists who take up that ask for Nielsen's new app that they want installed on their smartphone if you're part of the PPM panel. Now, the real purpose of that smartphone app is to port the listening information from your new wearable device back to the Nielsen mothership. It can also pick up listening from devices of anyone in your household. There's also a beacon they can put in the home that will do that, but they really want at least one person in the household to have the app. And the inducement to install the app is that they'll be able to keep track of the progress, their progress as panelists, and the additional rewards that they can earn in the national contest they can take part in using their new smartphone app. They want to keep people using their meters and keep them in the panel. So it stands to reason this enhancement will make contesting even more important than before. It's a good time to look at where radio stands in the audio landscape as we're talking here in mid-2022. When we asked which types of audio entertainment respondents think of as radio, Gen Zs, who are 14 to 25s here, are nearly as likely to identify DSPs, digital streaming providers like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, and others, as they are to think of AM/FM radio stations as radio. For that group, radio means things you can listen to that come to you from somewhere else. And when we ask which of these things do you have and regularly use in your home, among the Gen Zs, the 14 to 25s, below a fifth, 23% mention a radio. And I'll posit that among that population, for many of them, I'll bet it's mom and dad's radio, not something they actually own. Among Gen Zs, the 42 to 54s within this sample, Bluetooth speakers are as prevalent as radios are in the home. Things look better for broadcast radio among those likely to show up in the ratings in that middle clump of bars, or columns rather. Those are the RPS yes folks. 56% of them say they have and use a radio in their home, compared to just 39% in the overall sample. And among the rarefied group, who are likely to show up within the ratings and use a great deal of radio, at least an hour a day, over 3/4 of them, 76%, say they have and use a radio within their home. In terms of weekly usage, about 3/4 of this sample say they use DSPs, digital streaming providers, on a weekly basis, compared to about 3 in 5 for radio. Radio equals DSP usage among the Gen Zs, 42 to 54s, but compare that, where it's 65 compared to 66%. When you get over to Gen Z, it looks a lot different. The 14 to 25s, 77% say they use DSPs on a weekly basis compared to 47% for radio. And in the middle, the millennials, the 26 to 41s, it's 77 and 64. So that gets us to talking about app usage. And we've tracked this back to the start of the year, back in our RPS 19, which we fielded back in January. And most apps are down a point or two. And I think that's connected to the fact that we're all a little bit more active now. The pandemic is maybe more endemic these days, and we're out there mixing about more, in the car more. So apps go down a point, but local radio station apps are up significantly, 17 to 27%, which is great news. You'll note that Amazon Music is down sharply. iHeart and the Odyssey apps are off a little bit, point or so. And TuneIn, however, is up. I've set the bar here at 30 minutes on a smart speaker for these sources: podcasts, DSPs, AM, FM radio. The other sources, they've all been stair-stepping up over the studies since we've started looking at smart speakers. But you'll note that radio in this study is level from where it was in January. We've been watching DSPs stair-step up, podcast listening, AM, FM radio. AM, FM has been just hanging there with podcasts, but now podcasts have peaked ahead and AM, FM has stalled a little bit. It's a matter, I guess, of how much can you promote any one thing. We saw the increase slide ago for more app usage, and that's great. And here, smart speakers seem to, for the moment, have stalled. Now into the fortress of listening, in the car, the vehicle, which best describes the audio system in the vehicle you drive most. In yellow here, the regular car radio might have a CD player or, oh my God, a cassette player, but it's otherwise pretty much that same form factor that we've come to know and love, where there's a knob on either side and buttons in the middle and maybe some portal to receive your CD or cassette. But other than that, it's pretty simple. In the olive color on this one, the cord or Bluetooth car, where, yeah, you can connect a smartphone either via Bluetooth. It just snaps right in when you start up the car, or you can plug it into a cord that connects to your audio system. Or in the light blue, the connected car. There are apps that are native to your car that are just right there for you. And of course, some people don't have a car or don't drive, but those behaviors change things up a great deal. Those with connected cars, it's just 13%. But when we allow them to agree or disagree, they'd listen more to stations that they like if the stations advertise how to work the streaming. You see that 10-point disparity between those who have a connected car versus those who have a traditional car radio or one that's connectable, a cord or Bluetooth system. Everybody, pretty much 2/3 across any part of this sample, says 2/3 say they only listen to AM, FM radio stations when they're in the car. And so those who have connected cars are going to need some help. In fact, millennials and Gen X, 2 and 5 say they spend at least 30 minutes a day with AM, FM radio overall. Gen Z is different. 14 to 25s, that number drops from about 2 and 5, 39% among the millennials, or 44% among Gen X. It's just 22% among Gen Z. We will need to make a great deal of noise or make it very easy for them to come into stations and give them concrete reasons why we are relevant. I will cite that millennials and Gen Zs are different. The middle of millennials is in the 30s now, and many of them had the experience as tweens of listening to some radio station and recording songs that they wanted off the radio. Gen Zs, the 14 to 25s, are different animals. Many of them began their tween music experiences ripping songs off Napster. They didn't necessarily need to connect with radio. Now, among those who are likely to play the ratings game, the RPS yeses, and we show them here broken out as Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen X, radio does look a great deal healthier. Gen Z in specific goes from 22% across the entire sample to 42%, nearly double among the subset likely to be responsible for radio's report card. Tools to get our messages out to listeners and those that we would like to be listening. Social and digital apps come into play there. We pay attention to social and digital apps, and lots going on in that space right now. Some big changes here. The Meta duo in this June study, we fielded back at the beginning of June, loses some ground since not only the beginning of the year, but more critically from our point of view, year to year. The June 2021 study, and I tracked this back to June of 2020, so you kind of get the big view. YouTube, yep, that one's fat and sassy, and as more of us have TVs where we watch YouTube in our living or family or den, family room, living room, those numbers just keep going up. On the other hand, Facebook, 60% 2 summers ago, 59%, this is daily usage of these apps, 55% as of this June. Instagram, 55, 56, last summer, 52, gulp. Now you'll note that TikTok, 40% last summer, 39 now, Snapchat, 40 down to 35, that's a real decline. TikTok, the healthiest looking of that trio of younger social media platforms, Insta, TikTok, and Snapchat. And then there's Twitter. Wow, 39% 2 summers ago, 39% last summer, and then 31. And now you start to have a notion about maybe why Mr. Musk is trying to get out of that deal. That's a big decline year to year. If we divvy it up by generation, I tossed in the breakouts by gender as well, male versus female. You'll see that only 1 in 3 Gen Zs use Facebook on a daily basis. And I'll posit the idea that many of those are posting things that, yeah, mom and dad can see this, but for things I really want to share with my friends, I'll pick another platform. Insta hangs on to a thin lead here over TikTok and Snap among the Gen Zs, but man, that's razor thin, 61 to 57 or 54. Now, if I impose the RPS yes filter, things look healthier for Facebook. The Gen Zs in that camp jump from 36% up to 60%. It's a subset of people who are just, well, let's be honest. For one, they're those who are likely to participate in a study about their TV viewing and radio listening, so they're already more plugged into that kind of media, or they wouldn't agree to participate in the Nielsen study in the first place. And even with the Meta duo, Facebook and Instagram, losing some steam year to year, what we think of as the foundational four when it comes to marketing, Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, remain very potent. And I'm showing it here broken out by the RPS yes folks, but the subsets who are core listeners to alternative or rock in the third column from the left, or what I call the library formats, classic rock, classic hits, jacks, 80s, all of those lumped into one column, country P1s, hip hop and R&B P1s, AC and hot AC swept into one group. Had to do these combinations to make sure that we had enough respondents to show these breakouts with some authority. The CHR core listeners, and then all the spoken word P1s swept into one. So that's NPR and News Talk and Sports Talk and All News all in one breakout there. These are daily usage numbers, and these are people who are coming every day. So we know we can get their eyeballs at least once, but we also want to pay attention to the chronics, those who are 3 times a day and more. And you'll see that chronic app usage goes up substantially among those who were heavy listeners to AM/FM, either those in the column marked AM/FM 60 minutes plus daily, or frankly, the subset of those people who are the RPS 60s, those from the column that says AM/FM 60 minutes plus daily, who are likely to give us our report card and show up within the ratings. App location tracking has lost more ground as people are exposed to the messages and the choice, do you want to allow this site to track your activity? The numbers are coming down. Just a summer ago, we had 37% say they always or often allow that kind of tracking, 31% in January, down to 25% right now. The good news, if you will, is the people who are likely to give us our report card are just more willing to participate. So instead of 25% among the ratings likelies overall, we're talking about 46%, and up over half among those who listen to lots of radio and are likely to give us our report card.
As Lee mentioned, that is good news. It means that we can still game the system traditionally in digital channels because those RPS yes and RPS 60s continue to over-index and essentially lag behind the general public. But This is not going to be the case forever. And that means that as a station, as a company, you need a first-party data strategy. Building a data relationship with the audience is how we're going to battle against not only the kinds of privacy protections that are out there now, but those that are coming in the future as well. Now, that's the best way to work around those changes, but there are new things that we're having success with that we can do right now while you're putting that strategy together. In particular, we've been experimenting with contextual YouTube. We've got proprietary technology and allows us to understand what's being said inside online videos that viewers are about to watch, and then we can pair your marketing with those videos. For radio, things like core artists and channels that are a perfect fit for your station's life group make for unparalleled, laser-focused, and efficient use of your precious marketing dollars.
And so that's a good time to talk about advertising and marketing, I guess. As lives are getting more normal for more of us, it's becoming, as you might expect, harder to get attention. How often do you pay attention to things advertised in these various channels, and the wording that the respondency explains what each of these is? Direct mail is, things that might be delivered to your home by the post office, but we shorten it here, as we've done for all of these things. But you'll notice that they're all down a point or two. But I guess I can point out in the next sentence that they're all down except for one. Radio is hanging tough, 24% now, both January and now, as more of us are working outside the home again, as more of us are commuting and getting in the car. We realize that, oh, wait, I'm exposed to more radio and I'm more likely to pay attention to ads there. So it's level, where the others are, well, I'm busier, I don't necessarily pay attention. The ratings likelies, by the way, those who are likely to give us our report card, pay more attention to ad channels. And, as our marketing department thinks of it, it's a matter of what's the target to determine what's the best recipe, because you can see among these groupings, and we're showing them here, based on some of these combinations of format P1s who are likely to show up within the rating sample. The right recipe just depends on who you're trying to reach. You'll note that the library P1s, as well as the heavy listeners, the RPS 60s in the column on the right, share something in common, which is they listen to a lot of radio. The RPS library, the library P1s are, tend to be more Gen Z people listening to those library formats. So they're more apt to hear messages and pay attention to things they hear on the radio. And if they're hearing things on the radio, they're the first people who are likely to pay attention to your contests, the changes on the station, the liners, the new promos. They're going to hear them first. But what do you say? The most effective external promotional messaging that we're seeing here. Number one, actually, among those likely to give us our report card, the RPS yeses, the name of the song that's playing now. And that's so doable in digital media, digital outdoor included. You can show them, hey, if you're not listening, you're missing this great song that you might really like. Type of music or talk programming they specialize in, sure, that's important. And then rank-wise, everything beneath that for quite a while is just about commercials, trying to mitigate the commercial load. When you're going commercial-free, or you're playing fewer commercials, you only stop once, or you start every hour with 7 songs in a row. The idea that you're playing depth songs is always appealing. The concept is always great. It's then a matter of how do you do it, because that song that you love, maybe I don't, or you can do that by extension. It's very difficult to actually get that on the air, but it's a very appealing idea. Showcasing a high personality profile or team that has legs, not repeating songs during the weekday with the right constituency, that has legs. Contests, maybe not so much, but you'll notice that's still 43% among the ratings likelies, and pretty stout numbers across the different format constituencies. And I'll disclaim that at the bottom, we've got DJ or show that switched over from another station. As an abstract concept, not very important. But if it's that name that you really love, and the respondent may not be able to imagine that, the move of some guy that I don't know about, I don't really care. But if it's somebody I have a relationship with, yeah, they're certainly going to pay attention. But you'll notice that cash contest ads, 50% of the overall sample say they usually tune in, even if they don't participate in the contest. When they see a billboard ad for a radio, they usually tune in to give it a try. And when you get to the ratings likelies or the heavy TSL RPS 60s, those numbers balloon up to 2/3 or 3/4. So these tactics do work.
Now, because we know that so much is tied to the commute, and you're about to see even more data that further bears that out, and when we see data like the previous slide that tells us that habits can change with outdoor influence, it's why we've added programmatic digital outdoor and geo-retargeting to our tactic toolbox, and it's something that radio stations have seen success with in the past year.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about getting outside the home, well, we got to talk about listening while working. As of this study in June, nearly 3/4 say they're now working mostly or exclusively outside their home, those who are within the workforce, which is a healthy number. Just 1 in 4 say they're still working only or mostly from home. And the numbers tilt even a little bit further toward the working outside their home if we focus just on the population who are going to give us our report card, the RPS Yes group or the heavy TSL RPS 60s are biased just a point or two more toward working outside the home. And that's good for radio because when you ask them which best describes what you listen to most of the time while working away from your home, I'll draw your attention to the column in the middle of that grouping on the left, the RPS Yes folks. 42% say it's AM/FM radio, either over the air or via streaming. Compared to the others, there's 6% who don't listen to anything, and then there's another 52% who are listening to something else, either a DSP or some other service that's maybe piped into the office. Now, the numbers for radio are less juicy among those who are working at least from home at least part-time, and they're working there only from home or mostly from home. Now, you'll note that the RPS 60 numbers are about the same, 52 or 50% in either grouping, but don't forget, that's a group that we already said listens to radio at least an hour a day. Those don't change much, but the RPS yeses, we'd much rather have those who are working outside the home. And to put them in proper perspective, if I show them as percentages of the total workforce, it becomes very clear. Among those ratings likelies, 32% when it's outside the home versus 7% when it's from the home. So it's really clear where to apply promotional muscle. And in fact, if you look at the time spent listening of those two groups, those who work mostly outside the home versus those who work mostly from home, it's 41% who spend at least 30 minutes a day listening to broadcast radio. If you work outside the home, if you're working mostly from home, the number drops 7 points to 34%.
I mentioned this casually after our January study came out, but it bears repeating here. There is no "we are your work from home radio station" position. Now, we would certainly take those folks if they're listening, but as you just saw, radio gets used more when they leave the house. So from a marketing perspective, and especially with dwindling budgets, fishing where the fish are remains the charge of the day.
And you'd add in that, if you're working outside the home, the commute gets involved when we get even more time spent listening. So let's talk about contests and promotions for a bit. Among this group, you see the potency of contesting among those who are going to give us our report card. In the past month, 29% of the overall sample say they played in a radio station contest or sweepstakes, compared to 41% among the RPS Yes ratings likelies, or almost half of the heavy TSL RPS 60s. Now, how much does the contest gotta be? I trended these numbers back to June of 2020, and you'll see the asterisk there because back in June 2020 and Jan 2021, we said the top tier of the pricing that we asked about was over $1,000 versus we've updated that to $2,500 in the more recent studies. But nevertheless, if I go back to June of 2020, 67% said that, yeah, $500 would get me to play, and it was another 12% who came in when it became 1,000. At the time, we could say with some clarity that $500, I'd rather have twice as many contest plays, than give away the $1,000. But now 53% would be lured in with the $500 prize compared to 73%. So that's a 20-point delta between those two levels. And in fact, Nearly half say they won't bother with contests under $1,000. The numbers hold across the RPS yes ratings likely as in the RPS 60. So how do you promote, how do you package the $1,000? It's pretty practical right now. The economy is where it is. So $1,000 to pay your bills is number one. $1,000 in free gas, that's number one among the RPSES country P1s, those who are likely to give country stations their report cards. And you contrast those numbers to what's at the bottom. Yeah, we'd like to be, community minded and take $500 for us and the other half for a charity that we care about, or, $1,000 as of a celebrity or recording artist money. And you can imagine that number could come better, could go up significantly if it's a celebrity that's near and dear to your station or connected with people who listen to your station, or an artist who's front and center. If you're a country station, it's the hot act right now. That kind of a sell could have great appeal. But overall, we'd tell you right now, it's all about not living like a rock star, really living the life. It's about getting through. So how am I going to pay my bills? Free gas, free groceries, those things have real legs right now. Contest mechanisms. Number one right now is listen to the queue to text in and win compared to being the 10th caller listening for the queue to call and win. The name game has legs as well. Register online and then listen for your name.
So the $1,000 prize level has become the non-negotiable standard for contesting. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to be in a position to offer a guaranteed $1,000 at a rate necessary to be effective, such as over 5 to 8 week windows at a rate of 3 to 5 occasions per weekday. But the good news is, if your company has a big national contest, that bodes well, both seeing these data about texting to win, but also because we know that most contest actives are just blissfully unaware of national contests, and those that do know simply don't care. Just make sure that if you're doing a text to win contest, whether it's locally or nationally, that you account for the celebration of those winners by getting names and likenesses, winner audio, etc., so that you can prove that the contesting is real and not rigged, especially if you get a local market winner. You should be shouting that from the rooftops. Now, NuVoodoo is going to be offering an interactive solution this fall that gives you the ability to offer $1,000 up to 4 times a day, whether you've got $5,000 over 5 weeks to give away or $50,000 over 8 weeks, with no risk of overspending or ending early. We've got a number of different instant win executions, from spinning the wheel and rolling the dice to making basketball shots, or my personal favorite, scratch to win. You've got complete control over the total prize money and total number of contest occasions, the payout amount, and the number of contest weeks. Best of all, these games can be framed into your station website or embedded into your station app. Nielsen's going to be encouraging panelists to check their companion app for the chance to win cash bonuses throughout the day, and now you can do that as well. They'll be listening to you to win inside your app, which is going to be next to the Nielsen app on their phone, which they will then get credit for that listening, which of course ultimately benefits your station.
All right, so last section here deals with some programming issues. We'll start with music discovery. How important is it to keep up with new songs coming out? 6-point scale. And ultimately, I'm going to pay attention to those in the top 2 boxes, because at one end, not important at all, in black up at the top of these columns, or at the bottom in yellow, extremely important. I like looking at those two, those in yellow or olive, the 5s and 6s. So this really has a role in my life. I really care about that. And you'll see that it goes up among the millennials and actually goes down a little bit with the Gen Zs, the 14 to 25s. There are so many things in media or in the online universe, the metaverse, that they can pay attention to. But music is part of that. It's a component for many of them, but it doesn't have the kind of groundswell impact that it had perhaps when many of us were in that kind of 14 to 25-year-old age bracket. But if you drill it down to just those likely to give us our report card, all of these numbers go up. Even across the RPS 60s, who are who are rebalanced for gender and age, but they have a healthy contribution of Gen Xers who, even among those Gen Xers here who are likely to give us our report cards, that's over 50% say that new music is very important to them. So that gives you an idea of the scales here. But then when we turn around and ask those people who say that new music is very important to them, where do you get it? The number one answers overall are YouTube and DSPs. But among the Gen Xers, the 42 to 54s, radio sneaks up to number one, 60% for AM/FM radio compared to 60% for YouTube. And among the millennials, the 26 to 41s, we're in there. We're definitely in there. 61% for DSPs, 58 for YouTube, and 55% for broadcast radio. But Gen Z, the 14 to 25s, Gen Z radio is actually number 5. 32% say they've discovered new songs they really like on the radio in the past year, compared to 40% say for movies and TV shows like Stranger Things and Running Up That Hill. Now, it does look markedly better among those who are likely to play the ratings game, who are likely to show up within the Nielsen sample. So when you look at those 3 generational breakouts across those, the subset who are likely to show up within the ratings sample, radio is certainly healthier among the millennials. It's almost tied for number 1. It's tied for number 2, but it's it doesn't matter, 62, 61, 61. Gen Z still isn't great. In fact, we're still by rank number 5 overall. But you'll see among heavy listeners to radio, the RPS 60s, we still have an amazing potency there. And certainly do among, if I break it up by the ratings likely format P1s for these different format groupings that are shown here, you see the potency of radio still to this day. I can also tell you that car radios have an influence over where you discover new music. If you have a traditional car radio, 60% say, yep, it was radio stations that brought me new songs that I liked in the past year. That's the column in olive. The column in yellow is DSPs. Compare that to those with connectable cars where there's a cord or maybe a Bluetooth connection to their smartphone. Now it's DSPs at 63% compared to 51% for broadcast radio, or that 13% sliver that we showed you earlier that has a connected car where there are native apps right there on the screen next to in the middle of the dashboard. 69% for DSPs compared to 45% for AM/FM radio stations. First time we looked at this, how important are these slices of information to you? Well, we tried to think of things that come up within the sphere of what a radio station might be able to deliver about things going on in the local area. So great places to eat is number 1 here, 50% of the sample overall. Things to do in the area, 44. Money-saving ideas from local businesses, concerts, community events. And you can see it broken out by all these different format constituencies. And here, without the ratings filter imposed yet, I can show a broader range of formats. So we've got news talk broken out from sports talk or NPR over there on the right. Over there, kind of over toward the left, CCM, that's contemporary Christian music. But look at what happens if we look at only those likely to give radio its report card. The RPS, yes, where the breakouts of these different format constituencies, numbers go way up. These are all pretty big numbers, whether it's great places to eat, things to do, money-saving ideas, community events, concerts coming to the area are certainly potent in some of those format constituencies. And so it's important, we thought, like, well, where are they going for these types of information? And of course, internet is going to be number 1 these days. But compared to apps, which is ultimately the internet, but we think of them separate in some cases from just Google searching, apps are kind of right there in the same range of numbers with TV and radio, and all of them looking healthier than newspaper. We're not out of the fray for delivering information. One client mentioned to me that this actually kind of looks like a spot set that you've described here. But the point is that there is still an appetite for local community information and an expectation from some of these folks who think it's important that they're going to get it from their local radio stations. And in fact, nearly half of Gen X, the 42 to 54s here, say that they enjoy or rely on radio stations, one or more stations they really enjoy and or rely on. That's in yellow at the bottom of these columns. 40% among the millennials and 22% among the Gen Zs. In olive here, folks who say they're in the habit of listening to local radio stations, but there's nothing really special about them or in blue up at the top, they only hear stations when they're in a store or riding in a car or truck with someone else or visiting with someone else. It's just that. And it biases or it tilts a little better for radio when you get to those who are likely to give us our report card, the RPS yes folks, or the heavy TSL RPS 60s, or the generations of the generational subsets of that group. But let me show you what happens to time spent listening among those three groups, those who really enjoy or rely on stations, those for whom it's just habitual, or those for whom it's just kind of casual. They're with somebody else or a station happens to be on elsewhere. If you really enjoy or rely on a station, 44% say they listen an hour or more. It's almost 70% who say they listen at least a half an hour a day, compared to 24% or 44% if it's just habit listening at an hour or at least 30 minutes a day, and compared to 17 or 36% for whom it's just coincidental. They're in a car with somebody else, and you can kind of imagine the carpool person who's riding in, to and from work with somebody else who happens to be exposed to broadcast radio for that time, but it's not really their choosing. Our goal has to be to get more of those who are just habitual into the really enjoy category because they give us more time. It makes sense. So what are the tune out catalysts? Well, as you'd expect, the number ones when we ranked up a whole panel of these things, commercials are at the top of the list, whether they come too frequently or the breaks last too long, different sensitivities among different format constituencies, but overall, among the ratings likelies, the numbers, across the entire population are exactly the same. 55% among the ratings likely say they're going away because of commercials. But that's the same number, even among the ratings likelies, who say they're going away because there are too many bad songs. You can't get away from it. It's critically important. Songs repeated at the same time, one day to another, horizontal repetition problems, that's in pink here. In the olive color on this one, songs repeated multiple times in a few hours, vertical repetition problems. In the light blue, burned out songs, they used to like them, but they've grown tired of them, or songs that all sound the same. That number is actually its biggest among the library format P1s, the folks who like classic rock, classic hits, 80s, jacks, those, and the folks who are operating Music Master or a selector there are killing themselves all the time trying to make sure that things do vary within the quarter hour. So you're getting a big spill of different sounding songs along a listening experience. So those are the reasons to tune out. What are the top reasons to tune in other than, of course, music? Well, the number one answer is it's free. We ask them for their top three reasons that they listen to AM/FM radio stations. So number one is just cost. It's free. The number twos are kind of clumped. I'll include all of these ideas in the same sweep. To get in a better mood, we're a great mood pill. To keep up on the news, and I think that means beyond just the news, but I think it's know what's going on. And then DJs host specific shows that has a lure for people, or we phrase it as to know what's going on locally at 21%, or there's just the habituals. I don't know, it's on. I got in the car, I started up, it's coming out. But it's free is still the biggest thing, but that mood pill is so very important.
Of course, the best way to combat the kinds of tune-outs that we just saw and test your own station's content and shows to better find out what works for your audience is to ask your audience directly, which means doing research.
And we've got music research options, of course, here at NuVoodoo, whether it's, look, we call it OMR, online music research, but it's call out. There are no phone calls involved, but we still all call it call out within the company. OMTs, replacing the old auditorium tests, whether it's, if you need 600 hooks or that level, maybe where we can get that done as a catalog OMT where it's just done in one sweep. But we're having great success with what we call the EXT that Carolyn and Lisa developed, where each respondent here is, maybe about half the list, 200-300 songs, but every song is evaluated by a correctly balanced group of at least 100 respondents. And that means you get the benefit of a bigger sample and the perceptual questions that are asked alongside the music, and the respondents get a much shorter interview, which makes for better participation and, frankly, respondents who are doing a better job, we think, for you. And if budget is the only thing that matters, we can test 400 hooks with 100 sample panel for just $9,500. So there you go. So that's a lot of data and a lot of ideas. If there's some questions along the way.
Yeah, thanks everyone that have already submitted questions. If you have any and haven't had a chance to get them to us, there's an option right on your GoToWebinar control panel to ask them, which Jake is gathering on our behalf. So on to your questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your questions. First one is, how should we be telling people how to stream us in a connected car if there is no standard way that manufacturers use?
That's a great question. We mentioned this, I think, after the January one, when we started to see connected cars pull away. If you've got car dealerships on your radio station, if you've got those relationships, sales relationships, having the conversation with them about how you can get your stations pre-programmed, whether that's on the FM side or on your apps built into every new car that rolls off the lot, would be one way to start. The second, probably easier for bigger companies because you can have somebody at a corporate level do this and then disseminate all the information to everybody. But building guides for the audience with screenshots that, if you've got a Toyota, you can go to the website on the air. It's wxyz.com/connected car or something like that, that gets you to the guides and that allows you to choose your manufacturer and actually be able to go through step by step how to add your station to it. We've seen the data that, especially with the older part of the sample, the Gen X folks, and how they would listen more if they just knew how to get you programmed onto their radio or how to get to your radio station. So that would certainly be something that I would try for. I'm sure the folks listening to this call will come up with more and better ideas than that, but those are the first two things that I can think of that we should.
Yeah, I mean, when it's up to 10 clicks to get to AM radio on some of the new connected cars, you want to solve that. And you can even imagine some morning show situations where two characters from the morning show bantering about how to get this done could be hysterical.
Yep.
Great. Next question is, seeing the trend of Facebook usage, so we'd be more focused on other channels organically.
Well, organically.
I would
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You're the
Okay. Well, first of all, one of the things that we saw regularly was that ratings likely still over-index. So that is certainly, a good reason to make sure that you are, involved in it organically. I know Lee's mentioned in the past, being on everything organically is still going to have a lot of value. From a marketing perspective and a paid perspective, again, because ratings likely is over-index, I think that's definitely important to keep that in mind. But also, Meta is a network, so Facebook is a piece of that network, as is Instagram, as is the Facebook audience network. So in addition to the news feeds, as long as the targeting is good and the targeting is correct, then whether they're on their Facebook news feed or their Instagram news feed or stories or the Facebook audience network, third-party sites that carry and apps that carry Facebook ad avails, it still gives us a chance to reach them regardless of where they are. So, from a paid standpoint, especially, in the words of the villager from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we're not dead yet.
Last question is, can you tell us a little more about contextual YouTube and how that's different than regular YouTube?
Sure. So you've seen how high YouTube ranks in terms of daily usage, compulsive usage, even music discovery, where it's number one across the board there. So you should definitely be there anyway from a marketing perspective. But to take that a step further, we have access to a private marketplace that provides contextually targeted pre-roll inventory. So the tech will listen to the audio track in advance of the video, and it's able to pick up on core keywords. It transcribes those keywords and allows us to place them and define the content. We then categorize that content based on the category that is found to have the highest semantic value there. And then at that point, we serve your ads in front of 100% relevant video content and viewers. We've got strategically, we use a general group of categories that's going to more broadly reach the target, but then we'd work with you to develop a custom keyword list, a custom channel list that, I mentioned earlier. The core artists is a great place to start for radio, in addition to really high value lifestyle channels, and that allows us to hyper target the audience so that when they are watching contextually relevant content.
Great. Thanks everyone for your questions.
And thank you so much for joining today. If you happen to miss any of today's presentation, a recording of it is going to be sent to your email within the next 24 hours and available anytime at nuvoodoo.com/webinars. If there are any specific questions we didn't get to today or that you think of after this is all concluded, please reach out to us at tellmemore@nuvoodoo.com. On behalf of Lee and Jake and the entire NuVoodoo team, thanks again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.